from Moscow right now. So, Julia, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that all the capabilities of the Russian military can and should be used. What does he mean when he said that?
Well, this was part of his starkest warning yet about COVID-19. He was addressing Russia's coronavirus task force, which is dealing with the crisis. And he was very pessimistic, saying that the peak has not yet been reached in Russia and that there's nothing to brag about. There are still problems ahead and the country simply cannot relax. This comes as Russian officials are starting to acknowledge that the healthcare system of the country is underprepared. And so President Putin has called on regional officials to do everything they can to ensure that hospitals are ready for the rising number of coronavirus cases. As you said, today we've seen them exceed 20,000, and that is becoming a big problem, not least in Moscow, but also in the regions where the hospitals are less well equipped, and there have been concerns about doctors getting enough personal protective equipment. President Putin has called on regional officials to address that issue, but he has certainly been changing the tone of the official response to coronavirus with this warning. He does now say that the military could be deployed. They are already involved in some way. They have been helping to build small medical facilities and helping to ensure isolation measures, but that involvement could be stepped up in the coming days and weeks.
But Russia's official death toll, it stands at 148, a figure lower than most countries. So why the worry here?
Well, part of the reason that it's thought to be that low is that actually a higher proportion of Russia's coronavirus cases have been in younger people. So it's a younger population that has been recording the highest number of diagnoses of coronavirus compared with a lot of other countries. That's part of the reason why most of them are not dying from this disease. There are, of course, a number of factors that officials are still looking at. But also the problem that officials say is that the crisis still hasn't reached its peak. The numbers are expected to get much worse in the coming days and weeks. And so that's why Russia says that they need to do everything they can to ensure there are enough hospital beds, enough ventilators, enough protective equipment. They are starting to realize that this is very serious, and this comes after weeks of officials saying that there wasn't an epidemic in Russia and that everything was under control. It's certainly looking like they're understanding that the severity is much worse than they really thought.
Well, we also hear that Chinese cities bordering Russia, now they are also tightening border controls and imposing stricter quarantines. What more do you have for us on that front?
That's right. That comes after a number of cases that have been recorded in China came from Chinese nationals who were returning home from Russia. This is people who have been working or studying in Russia and have decided that now was the time to go home because life is becoming increasingly difficult for them. In Moscow, at least, there has been a lockdown in place for the last 2 weeks, making economic activity almost untenable. And for people who aren't Russian citizens, that's especially difficult because they're not going to be receiving any benefits from the Russian government. So a number of people have been trying to get home to China. The land border has been mostly closed. Flights have been mostly halted, but there has been one way through, which was the border with Vladivostok, the far eastern Russian city. So we've seen a number of Chinese nationals flying domestically inside Russia to try to cross that border. And that's where China has been reporting a spike. They say that they're now going to take further heightened measures to make sure that those people coming in are under an extended quarantine and are all tested on arrival. But so far, Russia doesn't seem to be stopping them from traveling.